Scott Jeffrey Miller, Management Mess to Leadership Success, 30 Challenges to Become the Leader You Would Follow. Whether you're new to leadership or a seasoned expert who's hit a roadblock and needs a reminder on what makes someone a leader, you're in luck. This blink is for you. This guide will help you to think abundantly, demonstrate humility, lead difficult conversations, create vision, and deliver high-value results. In turn, it will transform how you inspire and keep trust, earn top performance, and maintain the utmost caliber of management for your team. Lead yourself by learning to listen. Have you ever been at a party and got stuck in conversation with someone who constantly interrupts you? Maybe they're polite enough to ask a lot of questions, but they fire off another before you even have a chance to answer the first. Or maybe you're the person who does this as a coping mechanism for your social anxiety and deathly fear of silence. The fact of the matter is, the well-intentioned drive to fill space and create dialogue can sometimes backfire if you approach a conversation like a criminal attorney. Inevitably, your target, and they will feel like a target, will become defensive and shut down. Your rapport will too. Silence, if you remember, is golden. As important as it is to ask questions to engage someone, it's just as important to give them enough space to consider and reflect, formulate a thought, and articulate it. Each person has their own vocal rhythm and pattern. Some people may be capable of responding at 100 miles per hour, but others are slower and will feel rushed and not heard if you speed things along. So, what characterizes a truly effective listener? Well, let's first consider what not to do. Active listening doesn't consist of evaluating or assenting or dissenting based on personal experience, counseling, giving advice, interpreting, drawing conclusions on cause or outcome, or probing, asking follow-up questions based on one's curiosity rather than allowing the other person to lead. Let's consider an example. Your friend calls you very upset to share the news that their cat has just died. An evaluator might say, "Chin up, mate, it's not a tragedy in the grand scheme of things." A counselor might say, "Why don't you get your cat stuffed by a taxidermist?" A prober might ask, "Was she hit by the neighbor's car?" And an interpreter might say, "Maybe you wouldn't be so sad if you'd listened to the doctor about putting her down before it came to this." While the responders in this scenario might be well-intentioned, the problem with all their responses is that instead of empathetically inviting the speaker to share their thoughts and feelings without judgment, they're making it about their own feelings, needs, and pressures. Our culture doesn't invest a lot of resources into teaching people to become strong listeners. Yes, we're taught how to debate, communicate, promote, persuade, and present. But how many people have received formal training in the art of careful listening? In fact, listening is one of the most critical yet neglected communication skills. It requires an immense amount of attention, care, curiosity, and self-control. If listening is one of your weak points, here's something quick to try out. Count to 7 before deciding to fill a silence. Filling silence is, after all, often just a euphemism for interrupting and not giving the other person enough time and space to respond. You might be surprised by how this pause can generate a profound positive change in your relationships. Lead others by thinking abundantly. When you eat at a hotel breakfast buffet, are you the type to try to beat everyone to the punch of ladling impossible quantities of every food item onto your plate? Or do you recognize that there's more than enough food for everyone and that you can let your neighbor grab a croissant first? The first reflects a scarcity mindset. I need to get as much for myself before it's gone. The second is one of abundance. There's more than enough for everyone. Now imagine one of your colleagues approaches you with a concern. They feel you're overshadowing them by taking credit for all their projects and contributions. You announce all of the major campaigns and projects they've spearheaded without any mention of their contribution. This isn't an easy conversation or confrontation to navigate. Let's take a cue from the previous section, though, and say you take a few breaths, temper your first instinct to indignantly refute their confrontation, and reflect on the matter. Maybe you recognize that this isn't unlike the breakfast buffet scenario. In hoarding attention, laurels, and accomplishments, you may be failing to think abundantly and poorly attempting to forward your own reputation and career at your teammates' expense. While such tactics might get you ahead in the short term, in the long term, this isn't the kind of leadership that will be sustainable. While it's hardwired in our biology to accumulate on that which is valuable and for which we're seemingly all in competition, for admiration, recognition, and resources, there is in fact more than enough to go around. And not only that, but in the workplace, sharing is truly going to get you further ahead. Let's flip the script for a moment. Have you ever had a colleague higher up than you share praise, decision-making power, and credit with you when you felt like your contribution was negligent by comparison to theirs? How did that make you feel? Gratitude, appreciation, and a desire to put in more work to meet their positive regard for you. You're not going to want to let your manager down if they're generous, gracious, and respectful toward you in an authentic way. Rather, you're more likely to go above and beyond to meet their perception of you. Now that's good management. If you're prone to a scarcity mindset, get curious about yourself. Peel back the layers of this thinking, all the thoughts and feelings behind this thought and feeling of scarcity, and try to reflect on its origin. Next, try to shift your internal language. If you're prone to telling yourself, our firm never gets the top tier projects, it's all downhill from here, try moving toward one of gratitude and appreciation. I'm excited to hone our potential and to get that next game-changing account. Let's go. This shift is translatable beyond the workplace too. Rest assured, if you apply this to other aspects of your life, you'll also start to see results. Make and keep commitments to get results. Think for a moment about the commitments that form the cornerstones of your life. Perhaps they include working a job, exercising weekly, raising a family, nurturing friendships, taking a foreign language class, or spearheading a philanthropic fundraising drive. Your list depends on your current timeline and responsibilities, but the specificity of your duties isn't as important as your approach to them. Everyone drops the ball on something sometime, but if you're consistently overcommitted and burned out, it might be time to set aside some time to honestly assess your capacity and priorities. Like Russian dolls, each of these commitments in themselves contains further commitments. If you're a boss, for example, part of your job is leading difficult conversations, giving tough feedback, and firing people. If you're taking a class, you need to do the practice assignments and homework. There are varying levels of quality on the deliverables, of course, and there's always more you can take on, but that's the crux of the matter at hand. Do you know when to say no? Maybe you're already feeling overstretched when you're approached with a new opportunity to expand your global business profile. It would mean more talks, more traveling, and more writing on your part. Do you say yes without considering the ripple effects it would have on the rest of your duties? Or do you evaluate your availability and decide that this isn't the right time? Saying yes would probably mean turning your back on commitments you've already made. Your integrity keeps you from compromising existing promises. If you tend to go with choice one, you're not alone. We live in a culture that constantly encourages us to do and consume more. But you should remember that you can't do everything. Even if you're not consciously aware of it, saying yes to one thing necessarily means saying no to others. That's how life works. When you make a commitment, you're building a foundation of hope. When you keep your commitments, you're creating trust. So what happens if you tend to overcommit and underdeliver? It may feel like you're being uber productive, but you may just be breaking a lot of bonds of trust. Instead, aim to undercommit and overdeliver. If that sounds counterintuitive, think about it on the receiving end. Are you more likely to want to work with someone who says yes to everything and disappoints, or someone who is more selective in the projects they take on but delights you with the caliber of their performance? Practice saying no with grace. Maybe something like, I'd love to be a part of this, but I'm overcommitted at the moment and have to decline. If something changes, I'll get back to you. Thrilled by this project and excited to see where it goes. Alternatively, you can also keep it short. Let me get back to you on this, to buy some time to assess your availability. Attune to change to maintain leadership. Being a leader means facilitating and nurturing positive change. Remember, leaders aren't hired to maintain the status quo. Whether you like it or not, change will come no matter what, in the form of market competitors, legislative changes, pressure from the board, pushes to expand the bottom dollar, organizational and structural reshuffling, global pandemics. The list goes on and on. Many changes aren't under your control, but what is under your purview of impact are your relationships with your team and your people. Nurturing and investing in your interpersonal relationships, mentorship, and communication will impact you as well as the team and company's performance. All relationships are bidirectional and co-created, so how you relate and feel about the people in your teams will influence your performance, your approach to problems and solutions, and the attitude and morale of your colleagues. Across the board, it's important for leaders to establish a baseline level of transparency that fits the culture of the workplace and team. Which developments will be disclosed and at what point in the process? For example, if one of the goals of your company is increasing pay equality, will you disclose salary ranges now, or will you work to get the policy implemented first? You won't always have the bandwidth or time to share constant updates and disclosures with all of your teammates. A good practice is to share what you deem essential, acknowledge what is being firmed up and may demand input from others, and commit to keeping your team abreast promptly and in a communication style that's consistent, empathetic, and professional. Some leaders might tend toward self-effacement, keeping themselves buttoned up, not sharing much personal information or opinions, feelings, and thoughts. For these kinds of leaders, it might be important to make more of an effort to share a selection of personal anecdotes and tidbits that can facilitate a greater sense of social tissue between you and your team. For other leaders, the challenge might be their tendency to overshare, and their difficulty in regulating which opinions or emotions to share with teammates. For these leaders, checking in with themselves and remembering to prioritize listening, understanding, and a more tightly curated selection of internal states could be beneficial for work relationships and interactions. Asking questions is an important part of inviting others to share their insights and opinions and maximizing your social knowledge and context of the team. Having a multi-layered understanding of your teammates and the challenges and wins they're navigating will help you to be a better leader. A pause between the input of a stimulus, such as good or bad news, external pressures and changes, and the output of reaction will also help. Celebrate wins. Your team will be happy to have a flute of champagne at the standard yearly holiday party, but you know what can leave a bigger mark? Investing an hour of your time to draft a list of each colleague's special contribution to a big win and sharing it in person the next day. Bonus points if you memorize the list by heart. It may cost less than a case of wine, but this method of sharing credit and showing gratitude in a personalized way reflects your sincere appreciation and is sure to be unforgettable. Many leaders tend toward perfectionism. Setting your sights on cosmically high goals may have gotten you to your position, but you need to temper that when you're working with a group of people and within the earthly constraints of a business. Instead of focusing on what's perfect or not, try to define what extraordinary looks like. Practice valuing and recognizing when your team achieves it. This doesn't mean institutionalizing a regular watered-down kudos circle. People want to feel like they've worked for a real win and are celebrating a hard-earned victory, not getting a perfunctory pat on the back for maintaining a baseline. But if it's been a months-long grind in the office and that impossible project reached the finish line in the nick of time, that's a win. And it's a cause for taking a breather and reflecting and recognizing the group's accomplishment. Are you sleeping on a discretionary budget? Don't stockpile your resources for the impossible pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That day may never come, especially if you tend to work the team to the bone without any reprieve or bonus. Take your team out for lunch and invite your interns too. They've earned it. And frankly, you all deserve it. Investing your time in recognizing accomplishments ensures a boost in morale and spirits and will have positive ripple effects for your next big win. Let's toast to that.